Oh,
Brilliant. Good morning, Georgia.
good morning. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for joining me and agreeing to be interviewed in what is a series of interviews talking about everyone's experience at the London event
Mhm.
last year and um, kind of what's been happening since. So,
Well, it hasn't been in many ways.
yeah, exactly. I know quite a few things have, but I think to start off with, I'd love to know like how you learned about the London event, how you knew that was happening, what prompted you to go. Um,
Okay, so you know I come from a 3P background. Three principles to anybody who doesn't know what 3P is. Could be three P's, one, two, three. Um, and I had through that I knew Ankush Jain, and Ankush actually had done a women's course for the first time. And he had just come, well, he obviously knew of Steve, but I think he'd had his first Be With session with Steve. And then was going in to do his 10 hours.
yeah.
And Steve hadn't been, I'd never heard of Steve before, because of course it was just hadn't come into my world. I heard of Steve Chandler, obviously, because of all his books. Um, and Ankush just mentioned to start with the book, and started talking, obviously, about his experience with Steve. And then, obviously, all of a sudden, then the event came around. I bought the book and I read it on holiday in Barcelona, actually, between rain showers, and read it the first time and kind of gone, hmm. And what's interesting is I had that experience before when I came into 3P and somebody gave me Michael Neill's Inside Out Revolution. And I read it and kind of went, hmm. And in the end, it was part of a whole transformational process. So clearly, maybe this is what I do with life-changing books to start with, go, and then come back to them. And anyway, so Ankush then mentioned, obviously, the event, because he was involved in doing that one originally, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so it was a case of you have to go to it. So I went to it really not knowing, even though I'd read the book, I'd read it about Steve, because you do. The minute somebody says, read this about you, or don't look at the pink elephant in the corner of the room, what's the first thing you do? Look at the pink elephant in the corner of the room and read the book about Steve.
I think so we're talking about the Ultimate Coach book.
Yeah. Sorry, I
And
didn't say the
no,
ultimate coach book, did I?
fine. I um just keep assuming everyone knows which event I'm
Yeah.
talking about as well. Um, and I think when I first read it, I'm not sure I even noticed the instructions. I know, like Steve gave a manuscript of it out, and I
Yeah.
can't remember there being any instructions with it. Um,
I think they came later.
Possibly, and but even with the instructions, I remember someone saying one day, like, is anybody else still like kind of fascinated and taken away just by the back page and the first few pages?
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, and it took a while. It's probably why I've read it so many times because
How many times have you read it?
I've read it eight.
Gosh.
But well, I was involved. I've
Wow.
been involved in the
Yeah.
book readings as well, and not all those have been from start to finish. You know, sometimes it's just I've just dipped into a chapter, and but each time I'll see something new, and but I hadn't read it that many times before the event. So what when you
Yeah.
went to the
Oh,
event? Sorry,
no,
go
no,
on.
no. I was just about to say the most fascinating thing though was on the flight back from Barcelona when I'd read the book there, and I literally finished reading the book 2 minutes to landing. And I closed the book. And as I closed the book, I dropped a pen. And lady in the seat behind me picked up the pen, tapped me on the shoulder, and said, "This is yours." And as she did that and she sat down, I heard Steve's voice in my head. And Steve's voice said, "Give her the book." And I went, "She'll think I'm nutty. I can't just turn around to a total stranger and say, 'The voice in my head tells me you need this book.'" And this conversation that went on in my head, Steve's voice, because I know Steve's voice now, I didn't know it then, was, "She needs this book. Give her the book." Anyway, the plane landed, and this very tall woman, she was about 6 foot, 6'1" tall, and I'm very little with short legs, got off the plane ahead of me. And I just stood there and I went, "Oh, the universe really wants her to have this book." And I ran after her in the airport with her long striding legs and me with my little ones. I just abandoned my husband. And I tapped her on the shoulder and I eventually caught up to her panting and I went, "You need this book." I know I may sound like a lunatic, but the voice in my head tells me you need this book. And she said, "Well, what's it about?" I said, "Well, it's about a coach, but it isn't really about a coach. It's about our human possibility, what lives us. I just know you need this book." And she said, "Well, actually, I'm going through a really rough time. So yeah, I need some help." So I went, "Well, I don't know what you'll see or read in the book, but all I do know is if you read it, there's something in there for you." And we parted ways, and I haven't got a clue who she was or anything else, but it was beautiful.
Yeah, I love that. Really love that. And sometimes you said you something like you may think I'm crazy or something, and I said, "Oh, I've read this book 8 times," and sometimes I think people must think I am mad to um to talk about a book and share a book like so much. But I think you're exactly right. Like each time I've like read that or turned to a chapter, there's something more to see.
Mhm.
And what I've also noticed as well since reading that book is that it's exactly the same with other books too.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And you know, if you approach them knowing that or with that intention, then something always occurs.
Well, I know when I came back to reading Sid Banks' Missing Link, having read and been with Steve, because obviously I worked with him, I read that book in a whole different way. But there's also such a fundamental shift in me. I'd read anything differently.
And
And
maybe
sorry,
that's
I've
it.
taken you right off TUEE.
But I'm just maybe that's it. Maybe that, like, by the time you finished it, like, you are someone different, so that what you see and what you get from something afterwards is different. But
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah. Taking you right off piece. I'm
so
sorry.
we'll get back to the event. And you, so you knew about the event, and you ended up going.
Yeah. So I ended up going, as I say, not really, I think, knowing what to expect beyond there was going to be this very loud American coach. And it was interesting because, of course, I mean, you're British. So you probably get what I do. We do things in a different way. We're not noisy. We're not rattle shaking, whatever, if you know what I mean. So it's different. So it was loud and it was noisy and people were beautifully friendly and there were lots of pictures and lots of posters and lots of, sign your name on this, and very different having been in a different community that's actually really quite quiet. And I hadn't heard of Karen Rye or any of these others beforehand, but clearly they spoke with such deep love, respect, honor of what they had seen in life through working with Steve, through how Steve turns up in the world and how Amy turns up in the world. That was truly, truly touching. And when Steve came on stage, because he is, I mean, he's tall, he's larger than life, and he doesn't give a fuck. And yet, even though he doesn't give a fuck, all he wants to do is spread love. But those two combined means it becomes it's part of him in I don't care how I do this. This is all I'm here to do.
I love that. And I love, I mean, the speeches were amazing on the day, and I didn't take notes like when I was there, but in the, like, evening, I was trying to write down, like, some of the things they were saying. And it wasn't until I was home and a couple of days after that I was just like, oh, it didn't matter what they said. It wasn't in what they were saying. It was how they were being, how Steve was being, and like what they were trying point to. And to me, so you said he doesn't give a fuck, and at the same time he like he loves like so hugely. Um, and to me, like what I heard or what I saw or what I felt they were being was just minus judgment.
Mm.
You know, like if that's gone, then like who you really are is love and like freedom to not give a fuck.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah.
And I was like, wow, um, that's it. Like, just to me, it just looks so obvious that either they like don't have judgment, or comparisons or criticisms, or that like the voice is so small and tiny that they just
Mm.
don't listen to it anymore. Um, and yeah,
And I think what's interesting is, I mean, on the day, because obviously your 224 is going to be very different because it's a 2-day event and there's going to be people there doing documents with people and all sorts of things. So it's going to be it's an upscaled model on obviously the one I went to. And because I didn't even know really what a document was when I went to that first day. And I don't know I don't remember it being part of the day even. That seems to have caught people's awareness, become into a being of its own, another being. Actually, it has gained its own momentum, but I don't really remember anything about it on the day. So your next event will be really different because actually, having worked with Steve and sat with this and created this, I really understand how psychologically where we look is what we see, energetically where we look is what we see. Every word that we emit or come into contact with has a power to it. And when we put that into word, when we become the creation of it as it does us, we turn up from a different place. It is a rewiring.
let's so can we talk about that in a little bit more detail?
Mm.
Kind of what so since the London event, kind of like where that led you or how that led you to creating your document, and also the significance of that, like the the because you mentioned you're like three principal trained,
Mhm.
you had like um you were aware of personal development before you picked up like Steve's book.
Oh,
Um, some people at the event possibly weren't. Um, and so I'm wondering what you saw in that day or afterwards that was different, or what made a difference to you since then?
Mm. I mean, I came away from the day, I guess, curious. Um, and yeah, curious about all the hype around it as well. From the point of view that, you know, it was just a constant drip in Facebook, in my consciousness, that it was there, it was there, it was there. Um, and I hadn't created a document. I'd read and I'd listened to the book. If you get a chance to listen to the book over Audible, it's a really beautiful, different experience than reading it, actually. But I do know, as you describe, every time I would read the book, I would hear something in Steve's life that mirrored my own. And it may have been when, for example, his mother lost babies, I lost a baby, I could understand that. So the book actually was pointing to such a universality to actually all our experiences. And the day was about the universality of all our experiences. And I ended up, I put a post on the Facebook group, a verbal post saying, do you think we can ever get by all our snipers that live up here? Because even though I'm 3P based and I know thought as we are not thought, thought is what we as a vessel receive, how we experience our living. It is very easy to go, yes, my thinking means nothing. And excuse me, I'm going to use the word again, but fuck does it's the canvas of our life every day. And so when I put this post up saying, can we get past the snipers? Because it's really beautiful and lovingly zen to say, well, just ignore your thinking. But it is the most creative power that we experience as human beings. And we are vessels for it. But knowing that actually we are powerful as those vessels changes it from, well, I've just got to ignore that, because into understanding I get a choice to create continually. This is going to create, thought is going to create, come what may. But I can choose to let it run away with me, or I can choose to harness it. God gives me that choice to harness it. And whether you call it God, divine energy, whatever term you wish to have. So Stephen phoned me, and I remember just saying, you know, I'm going to come and work with you. And he said, and so let it be written. And I didn't understand. I do now. The reason that he says that is because every word has power. And my document is that same power. It really, really is. Not because I am the thoughts of it, but because it is created from the deepest part of me. It is created from this divine wisdom. So it isn't me, but I live it. Does that make sense? Because
I
to
think
say there isn't a me, there is a me, but me is malleable. Me is changeable.
I think that's really beautiful. And what was coming up for me when I was listening was that um so I've been around the three principles for a very long time, and I had seen so much of like my thought created reality, and lots of specifically in relation to um my judgments around other people, and so much of my life had changed from not taking those seriously. um what I hadn't seen to that extent, and what the Ultimate Coach book and the readings and the sharings in the group did were to shine a huge spotlight on all the thinking that I had about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And whether we say there is a myself or not, that thinking was there and I'd not seen it before. Um,
So
and
you'd seen judgment about others, but you hadn't seen judgment
I'd
about
seen
yourself.
I'd seen a few, but not to the extent that I suddenly saw them when I began asking questions like, "Who are you being?" Or I was reading the book and trying to read it about me, and I was like, "Well, that's okay for them, but I'm blah 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 blah," and it was like, "Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
that's that's what's being created." Um, and I hadn't seen it until I began exploring being and the book of being. And one thing that really struck me that I heard Steve say was that you already have a document. Everyone's got a document, and and it's um so and in non-duality terms and everything, when people talk about that there isn't a being, and y- you know that's great, and yet we're acting like there is all the time, whether we think that or not.
Mm-hmm.
um and it was just so obvious to me that um that wasn't helpful, useful, or kind.
Well, it's not. The ego is never kind.
Yeah.
Never.
So so the you describing that, and for me, for me it's like, well, what's more true than that? like like the essence, or whatever comes through is just closer. It's a step closer to what we really are, and what we're really capable of, and kinda.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know about you with your document. When I look at what I created with Steve, because of course you sit and, as you say, I sat and I had to write out all my habitual thoughts, all the ones that I knew I had, and then all the shit show that actually were behind those. And that was a really, I drove away from Steve's house sobbing, saying, I am so disgusted with what's in here that when you actually sit and put it down, you write it as opposed to it just flitting back and forwards. It rocked my world. It rocked my world that the poisonous stuff that was all about me and about life that was just sitting in here. The hurt, and I'll get tearful, so do excuse me. The hurt, the lack of belief, the stuff that this had joined together to make that wasn't reality, but actually that's what, again I'll use that word, that's what the fucker had done. Created such distorted reality that starts in our childhood and that just gets cemented into adulthood that we just don't see is there. And I know even from my first document that I created with Steve, from those original pages, that document was still full of pain because they were almost, how can I put it? They were a response to all those horrible bits. They still had pain attached to them. And which is, as I say to you, I mean, that was in August that I first did my document with him. We're now December. And it's only actually in December, literally 3 days ago, that I went, oh, my document's finished. And when I look, it's had many transformations from August to now. Many, many, many transformations. And it's been a shedding each time a shedding, coming to a point where actually a lot of it isn't about Georgia. It is about Georgia, but it's about the universal God of Georgia as she appears and as she is in this form. It has changed totally.
I can feel that, and it isn't just about the words, is it? It's about the kind of dropping of what's not true. It's so I think like Steve talks about forgiveness, and I see it more as like letting go, seeing the truth of it, not needing that anymore, it not being charged and feeling real anymore. And the process of that is, well, I found that healing. So you have, so you read a book, you went to an event, you worked with Steve, and not everyone who went to the event has worked with Steve.
No. They haven't sold a kidney or two to go work with him. No. I didn't know I had any more kidneys left to sell after children and school fees, but apparently I did have.
You created a document. It's went through a process with that. It feels finished now. I'm going to
Same,
say,
because we're in all work in progress.
I'm going to say, so what? Like, what's so great. Now what? What does that mean?
What does that mean? That's an interesting one. So if I look, if I share what I know, that every time whether it was Steve and being, whether it was Michael and 3P, whether it was my kinesiology waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and just hearing the voice of, oh, you need to do this. Each time it just had God written all over it. There has been a knowing within me, because actually I haven't been making the choice, or this hasn't been. I've been divinely guided each time. And it would be really easy for me to say, well, now I know it's going to take me to this, this, and this. I don't know. I don't know, because apparently I'm the last one in the chain to know. On a conscious level, what I do know, and actually my document, my time with Steve, all of this shows me that there is a weaving in life that just goes on. There is nothing I can get a choice. And Steve, actually, there was a point at which when I said I wanted to work with Steve and then went away with I left this room having spoken to him, and I came back in and sat in front of my computer. And I had the quietest moment of I'm going to sell a property and I'm going to spend an absolute fucking fortune and go and work with Steve. And my husband came down the hall and I turned to him and I went, Philip, I'm going to sell this property and I'm going to spend £200,000 and work with Steve. As it was, I didn't do that. I did the shorter package. And it was from the calmest, clearest place, beyond my thinking. And when I relayed this to Steve, he said, well, you were prepared to turn up for God, for that divine voice, for that wisdom that lives us. You didn't hesitate. Now, if I can take that into the whole of life, then I don't need to know what's next. I can just keep turning up to that quiet place that is my truth, that's everybody's truth.
I think that is such a beautiful place to leave it. I don't know if you wanted to say anything else, but it's been an absolute joy. Thank you.
I'll leave for tears.
My work is done. Yeah, really powerful. Thank you, Georgia. I appreciate you.